focus in and create some constants in our experiment called reed making. Yeah.
That's so important, for sure.
Yeah.
I would like to go back to, you mentioned you clean your staples. Can you tell us a little bit about your procedure for doing that?
I'll take a little brush. I have a few mini brushes that will go in there and scrape out the inside walls, and I'll even dunk them in Listerine, then just to clean it between reeds, I think is really important. That's what I have to say in terms of cleaning. And then, of course, trimming, like I said, around the edges to break down wind resistance. I also do something with tubes I'll share with everybody. I number all my tubes. And I put a number on both sides of the tube up above where it sticks out of the oboe so I can see the number when I'm playing on it. I have a notebook going where I will put down the number of the tube, and I will then trace the life or track the life of a piece of cane that I wrap on that particular tube. So I'll know the shape that I used on that piece of cane, where the cane came from, maybe where I bought it or when I bought it. And I'll kind of do a life-to-death type of tracking. And it's fascinating, the information that you can start to learn from that procedure. I determined patterns, like in the best cane that's used, or which type of tube, what brand tube works better, or are they all silver that work better or brass? I'm trying to find big things like that. And one time, oddly enough, I found that my number 3 tube kept coming up with a reed that had a killer result. Like every reed I wrapped on there seemed to make a good reed. I was playing it on concerts. It became my lucky tube. And I thought, that's strange. Now, either it's a coincidence that I've been wrapping good pieces of cane each time, or I'm scraping particularly well. Maybe there's more to tubes, and that this number 3 tube just happened to line up, because after all, that's the beginning of our bore, right?
Yes,
yes. And so maybe that tube just simply suited itself to the beginning of my bore better than all the rest. I've just come to believe that your tube needs to fit your mandrel, whatever mandrel you have, consistently, is so that your tubes reflect consistency as the beginning of your bore.
Yes.
And so when you inspect that and you look at the oval to see that the oval is symmetrical and that the cut at the top is, again, flush or even and not angled, torn or ripped up. Sometimes, they will be. And you look at the bottom, the circle, or the bottom of the tube as it matches the top of your bore, and sometimes that can be impacted, maybe it was bent or dented. Sometimes, if you notice, the cork around the tubes will be thicker on one side than the other. Now, if that's the case, how does that reflect on the holes lining up? When you put that tube into the top of your oboe, if those holes are not lining up, you're introducing a crazy variable into your game, and you're just playing luck at that point. I think inspecting your tubes is very critical, and just seeing, is the thickness of the cork the same all the way around? Do you have reason to believe the holes are going to match up? I like thinking of a scientific method that we all learned back in grammar school. X plus Y equals Z. All right, so X is a variable, and that's the cane. We always know the cane is such a big variable. Plus Y, which will be your constant. And, establishing these constants, at least limiting the variables as much as possible, can produce learned results, or limiting the guesswork that's all too often involved in reed making. So, for me, separating out and organizing my cane and materials is very important, with all the different diameters as specifically as possible. And I just happen to think that that's the beginning, the middle, and the end of the game, is the reed openings are so critical to the quality of a reed. Because you can have a great reed, and if the opening is too big, your sound is strident, your air flow is inefficient. The reed could be a quote-unquote perfect reed, but if the opening is too closed and a little pressure closes it entirely and stops it from vibrating, or you can't do a crescendo because it's too closed of an open, the opening is critical. And where we place it in our mouth for the optimum effect of the embouchure on opening and closing the reed is critical. I just think we have to, at some level, approach it in a scientific way to, again, limit the guesswork. So that's the way I like to approach reed making.
You have a very busy performance schedule with a solo artist, chamber musician, and an orchestral musician, and you also have a thriving studio. How do you keep a full reed case with your busy schedule?
Setting up a system that you keep in motion every week, and you have to work hard at preparing it in advance, being organized and disciplined. I call it reed case management. So
I love that.
we can organize our reed cases in a way that we separate the new blanks from the older ones, reeds just started from reeds in progress, already vibrating, reeds being broken into from active, those that are active, playable reeds, and your best reeds from recently retired or older reeds. Because you have to start out by knowing what you have and where it is. So at this point, please don't ask me about my garage because it's a mess. I have to apply it at home as well as the reed case. But I like to associate our reed making process with Henry Ford's developing the assembly line, which revolutionized the car industry, producing a great number of good quality cars efficiently. And if we can just think of our reed desk as an assembly line, and we can organize ourselves instead of just having a pile of papers here and there. We don't know where to find things. But
well, that sort of leads to my next question. Having all that organized approach to your reed making and your reed case management, your reed assembly line, can take a lot of the stress off of reed making. And I wonder if you have any other tips for creating a healthy balance between reed making, oboe playing, and just life in general.
When it comes to practicing, I think this is something we deal with all the time with ourselves, with our students, what to recommend, what seems to work. And I know it is a highly individualized pursuit, but many times we practice alongside reed making, and it's fine. However, I believe we must also practice without doing any reed making, and also make reeds without any practicing. One has to know their schedule, and they have to schedule time in their book. And as Nike says, just do it. Each type of session has its own purpose, but mainly to be thoughtful and be organized and think ahead, create goals, and remember to set your standards very high in whether you're in practice session and you know what you want to accomplish before you start. It might just be one Barrett study. It might just be the opening statement of a exposition of a concerto. Whatever it is, just think before you start acting. And the same thing for reed making. What are you there for? Are you just processing cane? Or are you scraping through the process? Are you breaking in reeds? Because I think that purpose placed in our oboe playing, our reed making, can bring a satisfaction, mental stability for having accomplished what you set out to do. I think we need to have those little self-congratulatory moments.
Definitely.
That somehow certify that we're accomplishing something. Or else what we tend to go in circles, and we might be accomplishing something, but it's a never-ending whirlwind. And that becomes, I think, unsettling for all of us. So I think that type of mindset helps an awful lot.
That is really inspiring, especially right now in the time of COVID-19. I think that now more than ever, I know I need clear goals because
Yes.
I'm not performing that much. You mentioned breaking in reeds a little bit. Do you normally break in reeds? What's your process from taking reeds from your reed desk to your practice session?
I think you need to make reeds, and you can make reeds, and maybe should make reeds without an oboe to constantly put the reed in and try it in the oboe. I think we can tell so many things about a reed that we need to know to make it a good reed without it touching an oboe. And I reserve the oboe for breaking in the reeds. I think either you already know if it's got the right balance and symmetry and it's crowing the way you want it to. Either it is or it isn't before it touches an oboe. And there's no reason to put a reed, for example, that's not crowing into the instrument. Why waste time picking up the instrument? And I think we probably all agree to some extent that the longer a reed takes to break in, the longer the reed will last and the better the reed is. The more you know about it, it's part of a relationship is just getting to know what you're dealing with and feeling comfortable with it and understanding its shortcomings or how you want to approach to improve it.
If you could go back in time, do you have any reed advice you would give a younger version of yourself?
A couple of examples come to mind. When I was at Interlochen, I had a friend who was also, we were competitors. We used to do the challenges and all that back then. And he became English horn in the Columbus Symphony in Ohio. Very good oboe player, and he went to Cleveland Institute and all of this, study with Mac, and he used to yell at me because I didn't have some of the equipment that he had, and I sort of poo-pooed it. I thought, I don't need that. It costs too much, and that would burden my parents and with getting me a lot of stuff, and I can make do with this. And people say, oh, the tube has to fit the mandrel just perfectly, and I'm thinking, I don't have that kind of situation. If I buy 20 new tubes, they're new tubes. If they don't fit the same way, it'll work. Make do, and rough it a little bit. And I didn't want to be too picky. I think we need to pick your battles, though. And I think one of the battles that I have outlined today is the need for the beginning of your bore or for the tubes to actually have consistency as much as possible, to limit those variables. Also, where I didn't necessarily put enough stock in a quality knife. I think getting the best knife you can, trying different knives, but having a knife that holds its edge and your teacher considers to be a good quality knife is very important. Rather than just a couple of cheap knives, get one that's more expensive but has been sanctioned as a good quality knife. Also, to learn and to get whatever equipment you need to get that will keep your knife sharp, and learn how to do it well, because that is so important. So these are some of the things that I think are primary.